Hi, I'm Felipe, and a little bit about me is first of all, I love learning, and I think I love learning most of all about people, what makes people do things. I've always been into psychology, sociology, and that sort of thing, but also in terms of spirituality. And I think since a very young age, I was always fascinated by by personal growth and so that would be a couple things about me that I really love. And to throw in another thing, I would say I love connecting with people. So any chance that I can get to just meet someone new, I love it. If you were to ask me back when I was a kid if I was going to be doing what I'm doing now, which is working with I Have a Dream Foundation, I own my own company, which is in wine tourism. I don't know if I would say that I was thinking that when I was a kid. I was thinking of maybe being like an actor or something like that. But I can see from a value standpoint that always had an inclination to help others, especially I came from a very low income family, so people that need help in terms of resources, education, which is what I'm doing with I Have a Dream. But I've always had kind of an adventurous spirit in terms of wanting to create things on my own and wanting to express myself through my work. And I think that's where my entrepreneurship spirit comes from. Whether it's running a wine tour or designing a wine tour or hosting a charity event, that sort of thing. Those are avenues that really become really a creative source for me to express who I am. I feel like when I moved here, I was 7, and before that, I was pretty social and friendly in Mexico, where I'm from. Coming here, I would compare it to my level of math when I came here. I was really good with math in Mexico, but then I came here and I had to learn a whole new language. But if you were to put it in terms of like confidence and social skills and everything, it really took a toll on my confidence, my self esteem, and feeling certain in my environment. So I think I kind of went in a little bit and became a lot more introverted. And it took a lot of years of just actually reading books, working on myself, and becoming a lot more introverted, which again, in a way, it drove me to the kind of work that I've done, the entrepreneurship work, the hosting events, and so forth, because I did feel very out of place for a lot of years in terms of socially. So I wanted to really overcome that and feel like I could, I guess, fit in for the lack of a better expression. At one point in my life, I moved to South Korea. It was right after college. I was broke and I wanted to travel. So how do I do this? And coincidentally, at that time, there was some recruiters from these private academies in South Korea that would take recently graduated students and connect them with jobs teaching English in South Korea. So I took one of those jobs. It paid for my flight, it paid for my housing, and a salary which was incredible at the time. Recent graduated, having all this, but it challenged me much more than I had anticipated. I was ready to come back the first day or the first week. I was like, wow, this is nuts, because I got there at night. I did not know anyone. The driver for the academy picked me up, and everything I could see was just didn't really understand any letters or anything at that time. And eventually, I learned a little bit about reading Korean, and I began to learn a little bit of Korean. But that pushed me to another extreme, which was, you know what? I don't know anyone, so I'm going to start just hosting events. And so I started hosting charity parties, and it started again. This is very, very, very much very extreme in the way that I had a lot of stress holding my first event. I was like, I hope I hope people show up. And so I got about 70 or 80 people on the first event for this charity event, and it grew to I would say 700 or 800 people in maybe within 3 to 6 months of me being in a new country. But it was amazing to be able to not only bring so many people together, but also actually make something out of it that had a purpose, and that would be to donate to different organizations that needed the money. And it was fun. It was rewarding, and I was teaching English, and then at night or later after school, I would plan all these events and host them maybe once or twice a month. that emotional discomfort, that discomfort with not knowing the language, not knowing anyone, obviously it pushed me to create these events, but it also pushed me to not allow the environment to dictate who I am. In fact, the Korean culture can be very shy. It can be very closed off when it comes to meeting new people. And so for me, I made it a challenge, and I challenged myself, and I challenged my environment, that I would just continue to be social and wave at people, say hi to people, much more than what they're used to. And even here, I'm probably more social than most people, just because I guess I've challenged myself in that way to really not allow the environment to dictate how I want to connect with people, which is obviously an important value for me. It really was a culture shock to be in South Korea, and again, feeling lonely and all that was part of, I guess, was part of the package that I signed up for. But something I didn't realize I signed up for, and it really brought back memories of discomfort and feeling inadequate, was being at a grocery store there where, I couldn't even say what that I wanted a bag for my groceries, and I felt very, very dumb, right? I felt just inadequate, dumb, and just not smart. And so, it took a while for me to get comfortable and obviously learn a little bit of the language, but it brought back memories and flashbacks of my childhood and being here, and how outcasted I felt, and and just how inadequate I felt. As if it was difficult as an adult, I can only imagine and reflect back at that time how it was for me as a kid, or how it is for anybody that immigrates to a new country. It has to learn a new language, especially as in childhood. Obviously, you learn it faster, the language, but it is quite the emotional roller coaster when it comes to being able to fit in that way. So, yeah, that's one of the realizations that I had just within a few weeks of being there. Wow, this is challenging emotionally. I grew up, or I was born in Guanajuato, Mexico, it's the state of San Miguel. It's probably the most famous city there. And I grew up there very, very low income there. Kind of unpaved roads and that sort of thing. So, but I didn't really know how, that it was poverty or anything. But at the age of 7, my family and I immigrated here. My dad had, really taken care of the legal side of things. And so we came here very easily, legally, in 1993, and grew up in the Casa de la Esperanza, House of Hope housing program, which also had a learning center there. And I guess that learning center really made a big impact on the path that I would take, and that I still keep on taking, which is I began to really get a lot of opportunities with mentors, tutoring, in different things like that through this center. It's everything from my karate instructor, which we had karate classes, we've had robotics, pretty much anything you can think of in terms of enrichment activities we had them. But we did have some incredible mentors. And I remember this woman that was my assigned mentor. And so we began to build a relationship over a year and 2 years. And I realized, even now, me running a program that does specifically this, how much of an impact that has. Remembering back to, an instance where this mentor, I don't remember her name, but gave me this book, which was her favorite book. And again, that phrase, "This is my favorite book, I'm giving it to you," meant a lot to me, and it meant that there was a loving exchange there, for the lack of a better phrase. And the book was The Giving Tree. And I did read it because it was like, oh, it's very important to her and she's important to me. And I didn't really think about this in this practical way, in terms of like, if it's important to her, it's important to me. But I did have the feeling of wanting to read it because she said it was her favorite book. So I'm going to read it. And it had certain lessons in terms of, in terms of not cutting down the tree and just using it up. And, it's a memory that I won't forget, in terms of that book that she gave me, and it really inspired a lot in me, because it was mentors that I looked up to, very different from me. This was a very blonde lady who I was like, oh my gosh, she's very pretty, and I was like 7 years old, and again looking up to all these individuals that were living very different lifestyles than I was at the time, and I think both. I think mentorship can be received from people from your community, but also people outside of it that can give you a different perspective. I think each of those has a different value. One can tell you, you know what, where you come from is enough, as well as another one is like, hey, you can also have a different way of thinking, and so I can appreciate both, I guess, mentorships from in terms of different backgrounds and cultures. Eventually, started working there and became the director for this learning center, and then only after that I started my business. But now I'm back into this whole realm of trying to help students graduate from high school and go on to college through I Have a Dream Foundation in Boulder. So that really created a big impact of, I guess, really valuing what it is to not only connect with people, but connect with people in a way where you're able to show them uh, the true potential, both in how they live their life, their career, but also in how they see themselves. The way that I see, I guess, my support um, with, let's say, with students or even families in general, but specifically students that might not know what they want to do, might not even know if they're going to graduate, or might not know if they want to go on to college, is not necessarily to tell them to go on to college or to graduate or to tell them what to do, but rather, or what their potential is in terms of a career or their future, but rather, um, what is their potential to feel as a person, how they can feel about themselves, regardless of the choice that they make. Not about the practical steps to get something, and definitely not about the goal, but rather what potential feeling about themselves they could have right now and move on to wherever path that's going to take them. Because you have people that might be incredibly successful by most people's standards, but are completely miserable. But and so really that is, I think, my goal in how I not only interact with people, but specifically with this work, is how how good they can feel about themselves, and how great of a person they can be to themselves, not to anybody else but themselves. 3 to 6 months ago, I would say, I had started working with the city of Denver in emergency shelters for Venezuelan immigrants that were coming in. A lot of immigrants have been coming in, and so I worked there. Started working just simply, kind of distributing food and doing the day-to-day things, which for me, in my restless spirit and in terms of creativity and wanting to put myself into things, was not enough. And so I started figuring out, kind of on my own, like how do I connect these individuals with resources that potentially the city had already there, but they weren't really being communicated to them. So it was quite the journey over about, I would say, 4 or 5 months, where we I assembled a team of people, about 7 of us, that gather resources from housing, from jobs, and education, English, for these immigrants that had just crossed, I don't know, 6, 7 countries on foot over months periods, and had the toughest times in the jungle, in Mexico, and all these different countries, again, all the way down from Venezuela. And it was amazing. It was definitely stressful, because everything moved at lightning speed in terms of both the impact that you got to see. We connected, just between our group and I would say 70 to 100 individuals directly with jobs. Never mind the job that we're assigned. This was us kind of doing the work and connecting them with different companies, whether it's been restaurants or construction and that sort of thing. But it was incredibly rewarding to see the impact we were having, but also very stressful, because these were individuals that many times didn't have any papers. They had been taken away, their passports. They had they didn't speak English. They had very little computer literacy, and basically knew no one here. So it was stressful. I remember even having a lot of nightmares, and I wasn't the only one. Speaking with my team, we would have very similar nightmares in terms of having these individuals come to us and ask for things, and us saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I'm sorry, I can't help you." And that was like the repeating phrase, because we did keep saying that over and over. It was stressful, and it was stressful also because of how much vulnerability they had. I would say what made them the most vulnerable was not only the lack of resources that they had, but not knowing how to navigate the system. And so it really created a lot of vulnerability in terms of them going out for jobs, for example, and not getting paid. That was a common thing, and just being taken advantage in general in terms of jobs and not getting paid was, I think, one of the biggest vulnerabilities. And not knowing the language, speaking English, as well as not knowing the system, it was hard for them to really, I guess, navigate those situations. But we did provide a lot of resources, whether it came from the city of Denver in terms of their prosecutor's office and different things like that to actually help them out with those cases. But yeah, it's an incredibly vulnerable population, especially the kids and the women, and not only in terms of being here, but crossing so many different borders. There's potential sexual abuse that happens along the way. They can be exposed to. So there's quite a bit of vulnerability there. But it was also incredibly rewarding to be able to impact them. Most of all, I think in our time there was with jobs, which is the number one thing they needed. I remember specifically this story of this guy who his wife and daughter were sick back home. I believe, I'm not sure about his daughter, but his wife had cancer. He had crossed many different, again, countries, got electrocuted at one of the fences, like really insane stuff. And then seeing his face as we took him out to eat, where he accepted his first position here in Colorado working, just light up and go from, just crossing so many borders and risking his life to eating a pretty high-end meal, and like just beyond happy, and so much elation that was coming from him. But so that's kind of the work that I did for about 5 months. At the end of the day, at the end of life, I think community is the most important thing. And where I'm at in life is I've realized that it's not only about, being social or doing fun activities or making only a difference, which is important in terms of, in terms of doing good work. But it's also, or more importantly, it's about building communities within your own circles that create a positive change, whether it's in the environment, whether it's social change, policy, or just going out on a bike ride, even something as simple as that. For me, I know for me right now, the most important thing in the way I relate communication to my life is that it's all about building community for me at this point. In fact, that's how I think about my job. That's how I think about my personal life. And that's how I think about my business as well, building community that I like to be around. Because many times we do get into things that we do it out of either obligation, or we have to do it for work, or all these other things. And there'll be things like that we have to do. But I really am a firm believer in creating not only a really cool lifestyle that you love and it makes you feel good about yourself, but also building community around your lifestyle.